Parents, do you talk with your children about compassion? Do you have conversations about how we support each other and live in community? My Best Friends Live in the Woods will always be a safe space, a fun, interactive story to encourage and inspire meaningful conversation. Let me give you a gift. I will send you a free PDF of the coloring book page I drew for this chapter. Feel free to print and share. Just click the link in the description below. The next morning was damp with a light mist falling. Little droplets of water were making their lazy way down the window pane. Phyllis was sitting at the kitchen table while Fred put the teapot on, the little fire he had going in the hearth. Soon the steam whistled, and he poured the hot water over dried mint leaves. He offered Phyllis the cup and stood watching as she held it up to her face, inhaled deeply, and let the steam warm her cheeks. He smiled. He just loved how she savored those little moments and pleasures. Phyllis noticed him staring and blushed. "If there's one thing I like about you, it's that I like more than one thing about you." He grinned, then filled himself a cup and sat down at the table across from her. I'm sure glad we had a sunny day yesterday for the dyeing," Phyllis said as her eyes traced the droplets on their path down the window. Fred nodded. "This rain will probably stop when the sun gets higher," he predicted. He glanced over at the yellow cloth, now hung across a clothesline they had put in the corner of the kitchen. "Have you asked any of your friends to stand up with you yet?" he asked. Phyllis shook her head. No, not yet," she said, sipping her tea. "I need to. I need to introduce you to the beavers. I used to spend most of my time with them," she continued. I think Mrs. Beaver, Auntie Bee, and Matilda would be my choices. Although I hesitate to ask Matilda because she will be busy with Bluebell," she said, nose twitching. "Well, when you ask Matilda, say just that. She can either accept or agree with you that she's busy with Bluebell," Fred advised. Phyllis nodded. As they chatted, sunshine began to brighten the window. "Looks like the rain stopped," Fred said, walking over to the window and peering out. "You know what I have a hankering for? Some of your cornflower fried okra." He grinned back at her. "How about we mosey out to the garden? I'll bend down the okra stems so you can pick the pods. They've gotten so tall it takes two to harvest." Phyllis set down her cup and went toward the front door. She picked up her harvest basket and waved her hand toward the door with a smile. "After you," she grinned, and the two headed outside. The short stroll down to the garden was still dripping and the air was washed and smelled sweet. A cool breeze stirred and Phyllis shivered. "Do you want me to run back for your shawl?" Fred offered. "Oh, no, I'll warm up," she smiled back at him. The okra patch was just behind the feverfew flowers. "These have really spread. I started with one little plant about 4 inches tall. Now it's taking over this end of the garden," she said, running her hand over the ferny leaves and the tiny white flowers. "I thought it was chamomile," Fred said. Phyllis shook her head. "These flowers do look alike. I tried these to bring down a fever. They help headaches too. Fortunately, no one needed them last winter." She stood staring at the large patch of flowers. We should dig some of these up and give them to other folk. It's a good helper plant to have on hand, she said thoughtfully. Okay, but first okra. Fred grinned. I'm hungry. Phyllis giggled. Okay, okra first, she agreed. Fred grabbed one end of the okra stems and carefully began to bend it down, walking out from the plant to help make a graceful arch. The tops were adorned with the largest pods, coming out from the stem above a leaf, with smaller pods above and then a gorgeous yellow flower on top. Some of the pods were a foot long. Won't these be tough and woody? Fred said, eyeing the largest pods. Some might be, Phyllis agreed, but this okra stays tender, she smiled. They had the basket almost full when they heard a loud, "Good morning!" They looked up to see Auntie Bee grinning at them. I thought I could find you here, she said. Oh, good morning, Phyllis smiled back. What brings you out? She asked. So, remember, I said we should have you over so Fred could meet the beavers. So, I talked to hubby and we would like to have a little get-together this evening. What do you say? She asked, putting her hands on her hips with a grin. Oh, yes, that would be lovely, Phyllis said with a clap of her hands. Are we done here? Fred asked Phyllis. She nodded, and he let go of the okra stem. It sprung back to attention with a whoosh. Thank you kindly, Fred said to Auntie Bee as he rubbed his palms together to get the okra stem fuzz off. Can I bring Gabby and George? Phyllis asked. Auntie Bee nodded. Of course. The children will have fun playing together. Come over about half sun this afternoon. We can visit and cook dinner before I need to get the triplets down for bed, Auntie Bee said as she started back up the path. Thank you. We'll bring okra. See you later, Phyllis called after her. Phyllis turned back to Fred and smiled. Well, that worked out, she said, delighted. I'll ask them to stand up with me at our wedding this evening. Fred picked up the heavy basket and the two walked together toward the house. We can bring lots of okra, Fred laughed. I'm hungry, but I'll never eat this much for breakfast. Phyllis giggled. Maybe we should serve okra at the wedding. Back in the kitchen, Fred got out the big fry pan as Phyllis took a damp cloth and rubbed the okra pods clean. Then she began slicing them into little wheels. Will you eat 3 pods? She asked Fred as she eyed the pile. Yes, ma'am, he grinned back. Okay, then 2 for me and George, and Gabby will eat 1, she was saying as she made a little pile by the cutting board. As she worked, she tossed the stems and tips in the compost bucket. Back into the garden you go, she giggled. Have to feed the worms, you know, she said with a wink. She got down a soup bowl and put some corn flour in it. Then, one by one, she coated each okra slice with corn flour, pressing it into the little seed pockets. Fred had the oil hot in the skillet, and they sizzled loudly as they hit. Oh, that smells like heaven, Fred exclaimed. Oh, I rather hoped heaven would smell like daffodils, Phyllis laughed. They turned as they heard the sleepy shuffle of footsteps. George was rubbing his eyes as he came into the kitchen. That smells like heaven, George said, nose twitching. Phyllis laughed. I'm overruled. It wasn't long before Gabby came out and plopped down at the kitchen table. She folded her arms and laid her head down on them. Baby, if you're still tired. It's okay if you go back to bed, Phyllis said as she patted her head. I can't sleep. My tummy's growling. That smells like heaven, Gabby said with a sigh. Phyllis and Fred laughed. What? Gabby looked at them confused, which made them laugh even louder. As they sat around the table munching on the crispy okra, Phyllis looked at her family and smiled to herself. For now, her life was perfect. What did you spice these with? They taste like heaven too, Fred asked, grinning at her. His question snapped her out of her daydream. Dried rosemary and ground coriander pods. I'm glad you like them, she smiled. I will be the luckiest rabbit in the world to eat your cooking every day, Fred said as he winked and touched the tip of her nose with his finger. Phyllis giggled. Gabby and George exchanged glances and smiled. Can I go to Mother Skunk's house after breakfast? George asked through a mouthful of okra. Swallow and ask again, Mother Rabbit scolded. George chewed and gulped. Can I go to Mother Skunk's after breakfast? He repeated, much clearer this time. Phyllis nodded. Only if you're back here by high sun. Auntie Bee came by the garden this morning and invited us over for dinner. She's having the beavers over so they can meet Fred. Oh, shucks, George pouted. If you can't be home by high sun, you can't go at all. Mother Rabbit squinted her eyes at him and tilted her head to the right as she did when she was serious. Okay, fine, George said grumpily. Okay, fine, what? His mother was still staring at him. Okay, I'll be home by high sun, George sighed. Okay, then, you can go. You know, it will be fun tonight, Phyllis added. George looked doubtful. The other kids are babies. They won't play hit the stick, he said with a pout. Well, then, maybe you can teach them, Fred offered. Yeah, maybe, George said, still doubtful. Well, I think the little ones are adorable, Gabby joined in, especially Tulip, she smiled. Are we supposed to be going to Mother Skunk's and the Great Glen this morning? Gabby asked. Oh, my, you're right. I forgot all about it, Phyllis said with a little gasp. Fred, can you clean up the dishes? Gabby and I are already late, Phyllis said, jumping up and heading toward the door. Anything for you, darling, he said playfully. Phyllis was agitated as she hurried toward the cave. Oh, I hope we're not terribly late, she kept repeating under her breath. They ran up to see Matilda and Bluebell sitting outside on the log circle, bonnets on. So sorry to keep you waiting, Phyllis called out as they hurried over. I was getting worried, Matilda said as she stood up and brushed off her aprons. George bounded up and asked Mother Skunk, Can George play hit the stick with me? Mother Skunk smiled. George, Albert, Nicholas, and Jimmy Squirrel are down at the sandbank by the river. They already have a game going. I'm sure you could join them, she said, pointing toward the river. George glanced at Mother Rabbit. Go ahead. Just remember, home by high sun, Phyllis said as he dashed off to join his friends. As the ladies headed toward the Great Glen, Matilda asked, So, what's happening at high sun? I was hoping we could all come back to the cave for popcorn this afternoon. Oh, that sounds fun, but maybe another day, Phyllis shook her head. Auntie Bee is having a get-together with the beavers so they can meet Fred. She came by this morning and invited us, she explained, very matter-of-fact. The disappointment hit Matilda pretty hard. She realized in an instant that she had not been invited. I see, Matilda said quietly. A couple's party, she added, feeling suddenly very alone. Bluebell sensed her feelings and quickly added, Benjamin and I would love to spend the afternoon and have popcorn. Can I invite Clara and her folks? She said as cheerfully as she could manage. Mother Skunk perked up. Oh, yes, that would be lovely, she said, smiling again. As they reached the great glen, they could see the minks lined up at attention in front of the queen. Clarissa was talking to them and looked up as she heard the little group approaching. Here come our lovely brides, Clarissa called out. I have a surprise for you, she said, motioning them over. How would you like the royal seamstresses to sew your wedding dresses? She asked with a huge smile. Really? Bluebell's eyes grew wide, and Phyllis's ears began to wiggle back and forth as she did when she was excited. Clarissa nodded. I have them here to measure you and discuss the styling, she said, motioning to the 6 minks lined up in front of her. The minks did a little curtsy and stood back to attention. They prided themselves on being quite professional. Everyone but Matilda looked happy and excited. She had assumed she would sew her daughter's wedding dress. She had already started making ribbon flowers to sew on the neckline. Bluebell instantly got quiet and looked at her mother, feeling her disappointment. Then Bluebell turned back to Clarissa. It's a lovely offer, she started carefully, but I'm going to decline if you don't mind. She smiled lovingly at her mother, seeing the shocked expression on her face. You see, I have always wanted Mother to sew my wedding dress, she said, and did a little curtsy to Clarissa. There was a moment of silence. Then Clarissa smiled. Of course, you are right. Then she turned toward Mother Rabbit. How about you, Phyllis? The offer is still there. Would you like the minks to sew your dress? Phyllis was so excited she could hardly talk. Oh, yes, thank you, she managed, trying not to hop up and down. Excellent, Clarissa smiled. Why don't you get measured while Matilda, Bluebell, Gabby, and I discuss the invitations? Clarissa said, and motioned for the rest of the group to follow her. Owl, could you summon Anne the Dove and Tidal? She called up to Owl, who was dozing on the pine branch above them. He sputtered awake and glided down to sit in the grass in front of Clarissa. What was that, madam? He hooted. Please summon Anne the Dove and Tidal and bring them here, she repeated. Owl nodded and flew off. Now, let's plan the wedding, Clarissa said, turning back to the ladies with enthusiasm. First, the date, she said seriously. Bluebell spoke up. We were thinking next full moon. Clarissa nodded in agreement. Good, that will give us time to get the dress sewn. I assume location is here at the Glen? Clarissa asked, looking between them, and they all nodded. Excellent. Now, what to serve? She asked. This time, Gabby spoke up. How about okra? Oh, what was that about okra? Phyllis asked as she joined the group. We were discussing what to serve for the wedding, and I suggested your fried okra, Gabby explained to her mother. We do have a lot of it, Phyllis nodded. The only problem is that it must be served hot and fresh. I don't want to be a cook on my wedding day. Mother Skunk agreed. We need something we can make ahead of time, she said. Then a smile put a twinkle in her eyes. How about my gingerbread cookies? Bluebell clapped and giggled. Of course, it's the obvious choice, she agreed. And I could make candied nuts, Phyllis offered. After all, I live in a walnut tree, she giggled. Clarissa nodded her approval as Owl, Tidal, and Anne the Dove glided in and landed in front of her. Perfect timing, Owl, as usual, Clarissa said, smiling at him. Owl did a little formal bow. I will need all 3 of my messengers to deliver the invitation to the forest. Say this: wedding invitation, next full moon at the Great Glen for Bluebell and Benjamin Skunk and Phyllis and Fred Rabbit. Clarissa had the birds repeat it back to her several times, then sent them off. It's really happening, Bluebell said, happy tears welling up in her eyes as she hugged Mother Skunk. Phyllis was glancing up at the sun and starting to fidget nervously. Gabby and I need to get back home if we're done here, she said to Clarissa. I'll bring the fabric to the minks tomorrow morning. Very well, Clarissa said with a nod to the rabbits as they scurried off. We're having a popcorn party at the cave. Care to join us? Bluebell asked Clarissa. And Tina and Matthew should come too, Mother Skunk offered. Yes, we would love to. It will be nice just to be Mother Dear for a while. We haven't had a chance to visit in a long time, Clarissa said, smiling at Mother Skunk. Give us till 1/2 high sun? Clarissa asked. See you then, Mother Skunk said happily as she took Bluebell's hand and headed home. Back at the walnut tree, Phyllis was pacing the kitchen floor, glancing at the window. Where are they? She fretted. It's just now high sun. I'm sure they'll be back soon, Gabby said, trying to comfort her mother. Why don't I get a little lunch ready? Gabby offered as she took some carrots from the pantry. Phyllis nodded, still staring out the window. Then she spotted Fred walking up wearing his straw hat and carrying something. As he came in the front door, Phyllis was right there. She grabbed him and almost knocked him over with a hug. Whoa, what is all this? He laughed. I was suddenly frightened you wouldn't come back, Phyllis said softly. Fred kissed her forehead and looked her in the eyes. I'm stuck on you like white on rice, he said with a wink. Then he held up 2 carved spoons. I've been whittling, he said with a grin. I made a spoon for Auntie Bee and Mrs. Beaver, he said proudly. How perfectly wonderful of you, Phyllis said, her ears waggling. You're covered in little wood chips. Let's get you on the porch and brush you off, she giggled. Then George burst in the front door, all out of breath. I'm home, he yelled. Good. Now, both of you on the porch for a brushing, Phyllis said, pretending to be stern but laughing. When they came back in, Gabby had carrots and garbanzo bean paste on the table. They chatted merrily through lunch, then headed out the door, spoons in hand to the badgers. Oh, I almost forgot the okra, Phyllis said as she ducked back inside and grabbed her harvest basket, still full of pods. The high heat of summer was over, and the forest felt relaxed and pleasant. Phyllis took a deep breath and smiled to herself. As they approached the badgers, they could see all 5 children scampering about. Mrs. Beaver and Auntie Bee were pouring water in the cooking pot, and the men were talking and pointing to something on the side of the house. They all looked up as they heard the rabbits, and Tulip ran to them. Gabby, she yelled excitedly and crashed into her, hugging her legs. Gabby laughed and picked her up. My, but you're getting big, Gabby said, holding her as Tulip squirmed in her arms. As they reached the group, Phyllis did the introductions. Fred, you know the badgers, and this is Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, Tulip and Junior. Fred grinned and tipped his hat to the ladies. Then he handed each a spoon. I made you each a little thank you for having us over, he said, grinning. Mrs. Badger and Mrs. Beaver were surprised and pleased. How perfectly lovely, Auntie Bee said, examining the spoon. Thank you, she said, and promptly plopped it into the cooking pot. Fred laughed. It's maiden voyage, he said, nodding his approval.
Can I offer you a glass of wine? Mr. Badger asked Fred. Sure, thank you kindly, Fred nodded. That reminds me of a joke. Someone offered me grapes. I declined. I'm not used to consuming wine in pill form. Mr. Badger laughed out loud and elbowed Mr. Beaver. See, what'd I tell you? He tells the best jokes.
Phyllis handed over the basket of okra to Auntie Bee.
Oh, wonderful, you remembered, she said as she took a pod and cut it up, dumping it in the pot.
I was at the Great Glen today, Phyllis told the ladies as they all sat in a circle cutting okra pods. The wedding invitations are going out. Owl, Tidal, and the dove should be around with it.
Wonderful! So nice of the Queen to let you use the messengers, Auntie Bee said, nodding her approval.
Well, Mother Skunk is close to her, Phyllis said, nodding.
True. So are you really doing the double wedding with Bluebell then? Mrs. Beaver asked, looking up from her work.
Oh, yes. I'm much too nervous to stand up by myself. I think I'd faint, Phyllis said seriously. While we're on the subject, I have a huge favor to ask of both of you. Will you please stand up with me during the ceremony? I think if my dear friends are near, I will feel much better, she said, searching their faces.
What an honor, Mrs. Beaver said sincerely. Of course, she said and patted Phyllis's hand. I wouldn't miss it, Auntie Bee said with a big grin. Let's make a sister pact, Mrs. Beaver said, looking between them. I, Daisy, promise to always be a sister to Phyllis and Auntie Bee, she said, smiling at her friends. By the way, what does B stand for? She asked. Beatrice, Auntie Bee said with a sigh. No one else knows, only hubby, she whispered.
Oh, it sounds kind of royal, Phyllis said, and that made Auntie Bee smile. The men glanced over to see the three ladies in a group hug. Wonder what they're up to, Mr. Badger said, pointing in their direction. Oh, wedding stuff, I reckon, Fred grinned. You nervous? Mr. Beaver asked Fred. Nope, he grinned. That little beauty is the gravy on my biscuits, he said, smiling as he watched Phyllis chatting merrily with her friends. I just love how you say things, Mr. Beaver laughed. Fred nodded and tipped back the brim of his hat. One of the greatest joys in life is the uniqueness of folk, he said seriously. And they all clinked glasses and took a drink and a toast. To friends, Mr. Beaver said. Back at the cave, Clara and her folks had just arrived. Molly and Clara were both admiring the dyed blue wedding cloth Bluebell had draped over her arm. Mother Skunk had brought out several of the little blue ears of popcorn and had the group gathered to pull the husks and the silks off and to snap the blue kernels off the tops. They look like little jewels, Anthony was saying. Mama grows them special every year, Jillian said as she snapped a kernel in the bowl. Charlie and Daniel came running up, grabbing a blue cob. That's not a toy, Mother Skunk yelled after them as she shook her head and laughed. Happy chaos, she said and smiled, just the way I like it. Soon the beautiful blue kernels were popping inside out into tasty white clouds. The smell of popcorn filled the air and had Charlie and Daniel racing back. If you want some, you bring back the cobs you took to pop, Mother Skunk scolded, pretending to be angry. They scampered off to retrieve the cobs. Clarissa leaned over to whisper in Mother Skunk's ear. Next spring, I might have a little son too, she said with a wink. Matilda clapped with joy and hugged Mother Dear around the neck. Congratulations, my friend, she said warmly. Clarissa nodded. Thank you, my friend, she smiled back.
Chapter 50, Wedding Plans and Friends. Discussion and questions. Friends and family. Two subjects that could easily be novels of their own. Friends and family encompass worlds of complex meanings. Each and every relationship is unique to the individuals participating. As Fred becomes part of Phyllis's family, his genuine warmth and loyalty make it natural and comfortable to also be brought into her circle of friends. He shows his appreciation by making gifts for Daisy and Auntie Bee. Question 1. How can you show your appreciation to friends that include you in their social gatherings? Question 2. Is there someone you could reach out to and include in your social circle? When talking with Mr. Badger and Mr. Beaver, Fred is humorous, but also honest and open. This wins him quick approval and inclusion. Question 3. Are you honest and open in your relationships? On 2 occasions, we see Mother Skunk's feelings hurt as she feels left out. She is not invited to the Badgers for dinner, and she is not thought of by Clarissa to sew the wedding dress. Question 4. Have you ever been left out by people you assumed would include you? Both times Mother Skunk was hurt, Bluebell sensed her feelings and immediately jumped in to correct the situation. Bluebell's loyalty and love to her family was always her first choice and priority. Question 5. Are you aware of and sensitive to the emotional needs of your family members? Question 6. Where are your priorities? Do you put family first? I am the composer and performer for all the music in this video. Both audio recordings and the printed scores are available on mybestfriendsliveinthe.woods.com. I will provide the link below. The painted illustrations are also my creation. Prints are available on mybestfriendsliveinthe.woods.com. This is a novel. The chapters are meant to be heard in the order in which they were written. And while each chapter can stand alone, they do build as new characters are introduced and past events are referred to. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. The chapters are numbered, so if you're just joining us, be sure to go back and watch from chapter 1.
In a dream, in a trance.